Welcome back to the Titanium Hanger. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well today and staying safe. I want to talk to you today about the market value, market price of items, and this is going to be from both a buyer and a seller standpoint. And with last week's video, a lot of people are talking about reissues, and market price, market value was brought up several times inadvertently in all those discussions in the comments. So this is a really good time for this conversation. I'm going to be discussing some of these recent current events and the figures that are kind of hot topic figures right now. And I'm going to use those as examples. Also going to talk about a few other business terms that I'm sure everybody already knows, but I'm going to bring those up. I'm going to show how this kind of affects pricing on the secondary market for masterpiece transformers. And I'm going to look at this from both a buyer and a seller standpoint at the same time. Same thing as being a good debater. You have to understand the other person's argument so you could tear it apart. Well, you have to understand, if you're a buyer, you have to understand your sellers. If you're a seller, you have to understand the buyer's situation also. So with this, I'm going to cover it all. Maybe you get something out of it. Coming up. All right, first thing I want to talk to you about is the retail price. What is the retail price of an item? And it's the new retail price. Okay. Well, that is pretty much also known as the MSRP, or basically what a company charges for the product. When it comes to masterpiece transformers, though, there's really no such thing as a manufactured suggested retail price. There's no MSRP, and from what I've extrapolated over the years, it seems like they just kind of take whatever they pay for it and double the price. I believe that's what they do. I might be completely wrong on that. That's how it stands for me. It's just the way I see it. I might be wrong, though. But still, I've heard no MSRP, and it seems like they wait for one person to price theirs, and everyone either matches it or tries to beat it. All right, so since we have the X-Transbots Ron, which is their take on an Ironhide, and I'm going to use this example for the retail price, what TF Source shows, and that's my backup. So that's why I use TF Source instead of any other place. If I miss it, it shows I go to TF Source, and generally people say TF Source is the most expensive. $175 at TF Source for Ron, and I think that's pretty consistent across all the other U.S. retailers. Shozy Store has theirs for $150. Now, with that, you're saving $25 to go through Shozy Store, but we're going to get into the next term, and I'm going to show this off. I do want to point out that I do have a TH reviewer code if you want to go buy stuff at Shozy. I don't care where you buy your stuff from. I don't care if you buy your gold and silver from SD Bullion or if you buy your transformers from Shozy Store, but I am showing you could save money by going to Shozy, and if you put the TH reviewer code in, that'd be awesome too. But I'm just showing this to you because the next one is going to be your sunk cost. So next is your sunk cost, and it can apply to a lot of other things than just the item you buy, but in business, it could go to permits and fees and all this other stuff too. But when it comes to collecting, it's pretty much just the items you buy, also known as the book value of an asset, the value of an asset based on the asset's initial cost adjusted for any related depreciation, amortization, or important cost or impairment cost. The thing about this is that you're going to notice that transformers generally, masterpiece transformers, generally either appreciate or depreciate. And very seldom do they just kind of stay the same. Do they float around that retail price? So after everything sells out, they seem to appreciate. If you can't get them at retail anymore, they go up in price. And if you get we'll talk about reissues, but I'll get an example of that, then they go down in price. I want to go back to this Ron example and show you your sunk cost. So $149 at Shozy, but at TF Source, I got to pay tax. And so it's going to be $190 on that. And that doesn't hit the $200 threshold. So I either have to buy something else at TF Source, or I have to pay the shipping, which I think is like $15 for that figure. So you're really out $200 unless you bundle and you buy two. Like, let's say you get the Ironhide and the Ratchet at the same time, then you won't have to worry about shipping. But you still have the tax on there. So your sunk costs associated with Ironhide would be $190 that you'd have in that. So if you go looking to sell it down the road, then that is where the market value, the market price becomes a problem for you. If it's not high enough, you probably don't want to sell it. So if this thing, when Fans Toys comes out with theirs and you decide you want to sell yours, and everyone else is selling theirs for like 125. We'll look at some examples like that. Then you might not want to sell it, or it might not be worth it to you to sell it if you've got 190 sunk into this. Next, I want to show another example of all of this. So when you look at where are we going to go with the current market price of something that's already sold out, like Jabber. So now we're getting into the market value of something like Jabber. Market value is a price that is currently offered for an asset in the marketplace, but it's way more complex than that. So it's nice and easy to have a definition that's simplistic, but there's not one price. Y'all know that. So let's look at all these subtle differences in price here. Now, I want to show on the left, it shows you store sold out. You can't get it there. On the right, this is TF Source 259. Now, I think they were charging 150 for their Jabber when it originally came out. And next week's video is going to discuss why it says 259 when it was 150. That's a whole different topic. I'm going to go into that, and I'm going to go down that rabbit hole again. But right here, trying to decide what retail value and sunk costs and all of that, this is so long ago that all that's kind of out the door. And a lot of people have already bought Jabber at an inflated price, and if they're selling it, they might have bought it at $300 and don't want to unload it for something close to retail at all. All right, so what everybody's going to tell you when you talk about the price, the value, the market value, you go to complete it on eBay. And I got to tell you this, people that despise eBay will never ever sell on eBay or buy on eBay, despise eBay. Every single day that they're dealing with buying and selling this stuff, they still look it up on eBay. Like, you don't like eBay, but you still use eBay as your pricing structure, which I think is a little bit disingenuous, and I'm going to address that because of the fact that if you're trying to sell as like a mom and pop shop, your pricing structure should be different because you don't have a global audience. You only have a smaller market, and you're trying to have basically a retail arbitrage where you buy in a small market and sell in a large market on eBay, but you can't have that arbitrage in a local market. So henceforth, a lot of stuff's overpriced in some shops and they never sell. But getting into this, you see the 172.50 on the top right there. That Jabber was missing the box and probably, I guess incomplete, but still it's a Jabber, and somebody got it for 172. Now, that was also an auction and not a buy it now. And another thing that eBay's doing is they're not showing you what an offer is, and sometimes not even if an offer was accepted. So there's a whole lot of subtle innuendos here that you've got to look at, such as like the one at the bottom, 223. Was it really 223? It said it was shipped from China, and a lot of these were shipped from China. Was there a best offer accepted on the $300 one? So nobody really knows about all this stuff, but we do know the one that was an auction ended at 172. So great. 172 is the new market value on this, right? Because that's what a buyer would look at and think. Well, no, not really. So what's even available on the market? Because you got to get into what's available. There's one for 275, which isn't really a bad price. I bet you they'd take 250. I'm not going to say they will, but I would assume within general reason, 10 to 15% is very reasonable. If you make an offer, 10 to 15%, generally the average seller will accept it, especially right now. And then looking over the 308, China, and a lot of these, almost all of these are from China. And so I'll get into next week probably talking about that, why I think there's so many of these that are Chinese sellers. And some are legit, some are not. I mean, it's hard to tell. But what is the real retail price? Well, if it's $275 and nobody buys it, it's not really the market value. So I want to get into reissues, and Shozi Store is sold out, but TF Source still has theirs. I cut my own self off while I was talking. TF Source has theirs $84. So it's not really that much more. Actually, that's a pretty good value. $84 versus just $80 at Shozi. And with that, this is there's a few things here actually. You can see they've got stuff on sale, and that's because they order a lot. But I'll talk a little more about that next week in that video. But still, you can get this X-Transbots Clat 2. How is this affecting the market value? So the first place everybody says go to your eBay completed listings. They're selling for 89. This is about between 80 and 100, and that's to be expected. Again, this is a global and international marketplace, and people ship internationally and all that. So there's a lot more eyeballs on this and a lot more people buying, but still, it's not really that. There's one that went down there for 70. I didn't check how much shipping that was. I cut that off on my picture, but still kind of within the range of just buying it at retail. So the market value and the retail price are pretty close to each other, if not almost exactly the same. So how does that affect the in-stock market? Now, there are still several for sale in that 80 to 90 range, but I scrolled down just a bit, and you can look at some of these. I should have sorted it by when it was listed, but some of these that were probably listed before the reissue are still higher priced. Like, people are still expecting to get a higher price. And you might wonder, well, how come these people don't just jump in there and mark it down to 80 so they can get rid of it and sell it at 80? Because they probably paid 80 and they probably want to make money. So they're just going to sit and wait it out till the market sells out and we see sort of an equilibrium rebalancing out of this. I mean, that's really what's going on right here. Effectively, what a reissue in the transform market does is balance the scales. It balances the supply-demand scale. And so when you saw the scale was way out of whack prior to the reissue, and people were paying almost $300 for Clat 2, the X-Transbots version of Cosmos, and now that it's been reissued, we see a balancing of that scale again. People are waiting for it to sell out, and then the scales to be out of whack, and the prices go out of this world like Cosmos if that is out of whack. I'm talking about the supply-demand equilibrium. But we got one more example to talk about. What's happening to all those old Takara Masterpiece Ironhides and Ratchets? Oddly enough, Ironhide's taken a bigger hit than Ratchet, which I'm not surprised. I've always said the Ratchet looked better, but they're the same exact thing and the Ratchet looked better. This is TF Source. They still want $200 for an official Ironhide, and I don't think they're going to get it. I just don't. That's just my opinion, my belief, but still, $200 for an official, and I think the ship sold on this that the retail price of $200 is not going to match the current market price. Here are some in-stock items, and yes, a lot of them are from China. A lot of them could be, some are KOs, and for those sellers that actually identified as a KO, good kudos, good to you. There's a lot of people out there that are still trying to pass off KOs as original, and although we could argue the KOs are better, if you want original, you want original. So if you're selling a KO, so if you're a buyer or you're a seller and you're selling, make sure it's KO so your buyer doesn't get all mad and upset and screwed over and send it back to you. So make sure you identify it as KO. By looking at this, I mean, there's nothing in here that's selling for $200. Except for, but not really $200 though, the ones that include the Shadowfisher kit, which is there's none available for sale right now. And there's only 3 listings that I found for Shadowfisher kits, which is the upgrade kit that fixes the wheels on the hips and makes it look a little cleaner, a little bit better. And people are unloading those. Now, if we hadn't seen X-Transbots come out with theirs, I almost 100%, 99.999% guarantee these 3 listings would never have been listed. People would have kept theirs with their Shadowfisher kit as their main one. So when you see reissues or you see competition come out, you see figures get put on the market that normally wouldn't be put on the market, including the very, very coveted Shadowfisher kit, which was only $25 when it came out, but it's been out of production for 6 years or 7 years, and with that, makes it highly sought after. All I gotta say is that my Takara Ironhide and Ratchet are going into alt mode, and I'll have them available for comparisons and videos forever, but I'm curious what you guys think about this situation, this scenario, and it's basically business 101. It's basically how this always happens with everything, not just Masterpiece Transformers. It also happens with Star Wars. Same thing, the market for Star Wars, vintage Star Wars, it's kind of on the downside now. Believe it or not, it's a good time to buy some good Star Wars stuff. I like watching Star Wars Daddy, Sells Daddy. He does a good job there. And reissues are definitely helpful to pick up some old figures for a better price. But let me know in the comments below what you think about all this. Was any of this helpful to you? Is it all still just basic common sense? And yeah, duh, Mike, we all know this. But if it was helpful to just a few people, it's worth liking the video. Like, subscribe. Pipe Hanger out.